My name's David McDowell. I'm a bee farmer. I call myself a bee farmer because I do this as a living. This is my day job. It used to be an amateur beekeeper. Started off in Manchester, did a little bit of a course because we had an allotment. An allotment and bees go together. You're an inner city kid in Manchester, you're not going to keep sheep. So we decided to keep bees. They were really useful. And then we decided that we needed to move for work. So we took the bees with us. And then we moved down into Leicestershire from Manchester about 20 some years ago. And then we set up our hives in this location. East, north, west Leicestershire is very different from inner city Manchester. So we were able to have lots more bees on other people's land. And then we got round to being sort of 50 something, and usual story, got made redundant. What do you do next? Well, we thought we'd try a hand at bee farming, because by then we were running about 30 or 40 hives, and now we run somewhere over 100 hives in and around the East Midlands. Bees are really important, and most people think honeybees and bumblebees, but there's actually somewhere around 250 different species of bees in this country, 20,000 across the world, 250 in this country. Most of them are solitary bees, 20 odd different sorts of bumblebees, and one sort of honeybee. And honeybee is the one most people focus on because it's the one we know most about. But they have a place in pollination of plants, but so do bumblebees. Now a bumblebee versus a honeybee is a better pollinator, but there's only 150 bumblebees in a nest and there's 50,000 bees in a hive. So the bees, honeybees, have their numbers on their side. And also there are plants that are specifically designed themselves to be pollinated by certain sorts of bees. So bumblebees have very long tongues, so there are plants that need very long tongued bees to pollinate them, and honeybees can't do that job. So nature itself is making the decision about who's going to pollinate them. Honeybees are more generalists, and they have the numbers on their side, and they're more flexible in that they live inside a building called a beehive, but your bumblebees and your wasps and all the other pollinators live outdoors, and they live under the ground typically, or they live inside a wall or some description like that. So you can't manage them or look after them. So you've got to look after the wider landscape for those sorts of bees, whereas we can positively manage these bees that are in the hives, because we can actually look at them and see if they've got disease, see if they're going hungry, and then do something about it. Honeybees have lived in the Northern Hemisphere for 120 million years. They're used to the idea of short days in winter and long days in the summer, and they organise their life cycle around that. So the other part that's going on there is that in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere there's not much food around. As the spring comes on you get more food, then you have lots of food during the summer, and it diminishes in the autumn to nothing. And their life cycles organise around that. So in the summer they're kind of cruising. You know, they've got everything they need, they're just having a nice time in the summer, there's enough brood going on, there's enough resources coming into the hive, and everything's great. Then as the days get shorter, nature itself starts shutting down, we get less flowers, so the bees then are going into the winter, but what are they going to eat? Because there's no food for them through the winter. But they have spent all the spring and all of the rest of the summer collecting nectar from the flowers and turning it into honey, and the honey is then held in the hive. So in order to do that, the queen, who lives about 5 years, stays inside the hive. She lays eggs while she's told to, and then as the spring starts to warm up and the days get longer, the resources become more available, i.e. flowers are growing, and then the bees go out, forage that, and now they've got the resources to build up their nest. And so we go from 10,000–15,000 bees over the winter to 60,000 bees during the summer. And along that journey, the bees are generating workers, because they do all the work, and they're all females. And then they generate some drones, which are male bees, that's going to use for mating later on. And then at some point during the summer, they're going to decide they want to swarm. And swarm is dividing the colony in two to create a new queen who creates a new colony. So that's a reproduction of the colony. And then they cruise through the summer, they put everything away, they glide down into the winter, they huddle together to keep warm for the winter, and then wait for the new spring to come to start building up their colony again. So it's a wave, a cycle that's connected with, they're solar powered essentially, so whatever the sun does, that's how they're going to operate. And along with the sun is the environment, and then they're wedded to the environment to give them the resources they need to build up their nests.